Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian. I am co-founder at Ruby Reese and at dognutrition.ie, and I'll also be your host. Shortly, we will be introducing the topic of loose leash walking, a brilliant topic and an even better guest to speak about it. That's Emmet from Sound as a Hound. But before we jump into that, we know that lots of you will want help with your loose leash walking, and there are definitely professionals out there to help with that. But at dognutrition.ie, we wanted to remind you that you can get in touch with us for a free discovery call at the time we're recording, at least, so that we can talk through your case with you and see if we're the right professionals to help you with your dog's nutrition or with supporting, get them getting to their optimal weight, or supporting with allergies, with food changes, just making sure that your dog has the right nutritional balance. We might be the right professionals for you. So do reach out to us, and we will definitely be able to have a conversation with you or push you in the right direction, because of course we're not working in isolation. We work with lots and lots of different professionals when you get in touch with dognutrition.ie. So without further ado now, I would love to introduce the topic of loose leash walking and our guest, Emmet. Hello Emmet, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Not too bad, Killian. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on and chatting with me. Would you do us the pleasure of introducing yourself for anyone that might not know you yet?
Absolutely. My name is Emmet McNamara. I am the owner and founder of Sound as a Hound dog training in Limerick. I am also a graduate of Credence College in Cork, a member of IAABC, and most recently and most proudly, a member and affiliate member of Snout and About Cork Behavioural Consultancy.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that. And we picked a really, really cool topic, one that's, I suppose, hot on a lot of people's lips at the moment,
Very much
loose
so.
leash walking. You see it all over social media and everything. So what do people actually mean by loose leash walking, and why is it even a hot topic, I suppose, in our dog community?
Starting off strong straight out the gate.
Yeah, that's it.
So the definition of loose leash walking is generally considered to be the dog is on leash, whether it's on collar, harness, or any other kind of walking equipment, and they're walking at their own pace, but the leash is kept loose between them. What I found quite recently is that there seems to be a mismatch between that idea of loose leash comfortable walking and almost competitive level obedience heel work. That they
Okay.
want, a lot of people seem to want the dog to be completely glued to the heel, offering them up this like unbreakable engagement more than anything else. And for me as a trainer, I think that's actually kind of betraying the animal at the other end of the leash, and this kind of proliferation of the social media accounts that show these highly trained Malinois doing that kind of thing has kind of soured the idea of loose leash walking more than anything else. Um, so it's kind of like a concept of basically the dog should be comfortably walking on a loose leash, that your shoulder isn't actually being pulled out, and that the dog is not actually pulling at the other side of the leash.
And that's amazing, because like, your focus here is obviously very clearly on comfort for both the owner and for the dog, not on looks, I suppose. People need to ask themselves, who are they trying to impress? Is this for Instagram? Is this for the neighbors when they're maybe overtraining and
Mhm.
working with this heel work? Because you have to be, I suppose, comfortable in your own life and in your own routines with your dog, right?
Absolutely, and that kind of aspirational thing to have that dog at the heel all the time does tend to lead to an awful lot of frustration more than anything else from the dog owners and from the dogs at the other side of the leash as well. Because, I mean, I'm no great mathematician, but at the end of the day, I know that four legs are more than two.
Hmm.
So even the smaller dogs could very quickly outpace us on our standard walking kind of sauntering pace. So to ask a dog to kind of impede their own natural gait, to be completely glued to us all the time is kind of unfair on the dog, and it's not as comfortable. They're not moving as freely from a biomechanical kind of physiological point of view. Um, so, I mean, dogs will walk faster than us, and I think Eniad had a wonderful post up quite recently of just an image of a person walking in a straight line and then their dog walking in all these other different directions, and that is a more natural movement for dogs. Breeds come into it as well. Different breeds work in different kind of ways.
Hmm.
My own guy is a Springer Spaniel. Springer Spaniels are big hunting dogs. They are made to flush, and they flush by quartering a field. And quartering a field basically means that they move in these crazy, chaotic, zigzag movements. So imagine trying to bring a Springer Spaniel out on a loose leash walk. It's completely unnatural to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose just to touch on flushing, that means getting kind of birds out of bushes and things like that, right? Isn't it?
Birds out
It's
of
like,
bushes, game out of bushes, generally so that the game kind of either comes closer towards the person that is stalking or hunting it, or up into the air, which allows the hunter to easier access of the bird.
so isn't it amazing they were bred for causing a bit of commotion, really? So, and we're expecting
Yeah,
them then maybe in our minds to kind of like walk along pleasantly with us on at a nice, very slow pace when they were
absolutely.
bred for
And this
something
is the
very
thing that
differently.
that slow pace is generally not conducive to the natural movement of a dog, more 100%. And when I try to teach loose walking to any of my clients, I try to get them out of that idea that the dog needs to be with them all the time, giving engagement, that type of a thing, because at the end of the day, that kind of freedom of movement is far more beneficial to them. It honestly doesn't matter if the leash is loose and the dog is in front of you, or if the leash is loose and the dog is behind you. I mean, you might have a senior dog that still needs a little bit of exercise as well because they might have maybe some osteoarthritic conditions, and movement is a good lubricator for those kinds of conditions. Then kind of trying to pull a senior dog along to get them close to heel, that's really unfair. So just having that leash loose, if they're happy to saunter on behind you, fantastic. If they're happy to kind of be a little bit more drivey and go, I want to walk forward. Walking forward is not a dominance thing. It's not that dog kind of going, I'm moving this walk, let's go, I'm leading it, I'm the pack leader. That is completely defunct. There's no such thing as that. That dog just wants to enjoy the environment and engage in that environment. And that's the least what we can do for them, especially when we are on a loose leash walk.
Definitely, and I suppose going slightly off track here, but I think we need to think as well about going on dog walks, about why are we going on dog walks? Is it to get your steps in, or is it so that you can give your dog an amazing experience out? It's their little window of fun, probably of not living their domesticated lives at home. Shouldn't we be saying, God, how can we go out and have a great time together? Isn't that why I got a dog in the first place?
100%, 100%. And this brings up another interesting topic as well in terms of the dogs themselves. The loose leash walking as a whole, the traditional training as a whole, is more of a human want rather than or human desire rather than a dog driven need. So there's this really interesting concept in psychology called an Umwelt, and the Umwelt was kind of coined by, I believe his name was Jakob von Uskul, and he was a German biologist. It basically means the an organism's ability to perceive and engage with the world as dictated by their capabilities of their sensory organs. Blah 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 blah. Long sciencey kind of explanation. What it basically means is if the dog or their primary sense is their nose, that is how they engage with the world. Their perception of the world is mainly through their nose, and it is something that's completely explored in Alexandra Horowitz's book Inside of a Dog, which I highly recommend. It's really eye-opening to how dogs perceive the world, how their sensory capabilities kind of engage their world. But if they are so nose forward, allowing them to go on a walk that is directed by their nose is so much more beneficial to quote unquote getting their steps in. The mental side of their exercise in their loose leash walking is about 100 times more effective at training that brain, about engaging that brain, about giving them that sense of fulfillment than just walking in a straight line towards a destination. It's to quote one of my favorite fantasy authors, it's the journey, not the destination, that is the most important. So if that dog is kind of going, I'm going to go over here, sniff this lamppost because Rocco down the road peed on it 10 minutes ago and he's given me all this information, I'm going to sniff that. That is the best part of their walk,
Yeah.
100%. And this is the thing that we will never fully understand how they fully perceive of the world, but we can imagine. Imagine that, we see with our eyes are incredibly complicated. We see something that we want, we walk straight towards it. Their perception of the world is so much led by their nose, scent trails, and the wind picking up scent trails that it's only natural that if they smell Rocco over on this lamppost here, that scent trail is going to be blown by any bit of wind over across the rest of the road or down the field, and they're going to smell Rocco from 100 meters away, 200 meters away, maybe in a bush that Rocco didn't even go to. But because that scent trail is being blown down, they're picking it up. They're processing all that information immediately. And that is how they engage with the world. I kind of liken it to, imagine you're a piano virtuoso and you're sitting in front of this gorgeous Yamaha grand piano, but your arms are tied. Like you're gonna go a little bit mad and doolally to get to that piano, and that's kind of similar in the reasoning why a lot of dogs pull. They want to get to where the scents are. They want to have that kind of sensory experience more than anything else.
Which is amazing, and it's amazing to even imagine how dogs are experiencing the world as well. Like you say, we're viewing things more than anything else, so we see kind of like the shapes are very clearly defined, and whereas scents are a lot more, let's say, blurred, or maybe it's more of a kind of symphony of things going on.
100%. The amount of information that a dog can take up by their nose alone is pale. Like our eyesight pales in comparison. Like we pride ourselves as a species that our eyesight is incredibly complicated, and it is. But the amount of information that a dog can process in a split second from a scent alone is outstanding. I mean, they can technically tell time through scent deterioration, which is mind-blowing that they have this conception of time that is not linked to how we conceive time and how we feel time.
Which
Anyway,
is
off topic.
unbelievable. No, but it's so interesting. And I suppose we've spoken a little bit now about their ability to smell and kind of have lovely experiences on leash. So number one, we need to talk about sniffaries.
Yes.
So that's kind of popular as well to talk about, I suppose, letting your dog smell along the way. But I also wanted to bring up maybe whether there might be a case for having training for both on-leash and off-leash skills then, to have maybe some more of these interesting scenarios in a dog's life potentially.
100% there are scenarios to focus on-leash skills and off-leash skills. I would be obviously, look, am I putting loose leash walking on blast and that it shouldn't be a thing? Absolutely not. 100% not. Loose leash walking, any kind of leash walking really, is a safety mechanism. It falls into our human given, not necessarily rights, but our human given necessity to have control over the dog. I mean, in a lot of countries, there is the control of dog acts and the effective control of dogs. So they do need to be on leash. They do need to be under effective control. And also, it is a safety mechanism. If we're out walking our dogs in the middle of the city, we don't want our dogs wandering into the middle of a busy road to cause an accident, or worse of all, get themselves injured. So there is that level of safety that is necessary. So those on-leash skills are incredibly important. But a lot of knowledge, or even a little knowledge, goes a long way to understanding the importance of how the dog walks physiologically and biomechanically on a leash, harness, collar, as opposed to off-leash movement. Off-leash movement is very fluid. If you watch your dog running off-leash, it's so fluid. They know what they're doing. They know their body. They know which way they can turn. They know how quickly they can turn. They know how quickly they can run. They know how where to place their paws. They're very confident. And that movement is so much better for them than their standard kind of like plodding along gait beside us. Off-leash skills, the best thing that we can teach them, and the one that always goes hand in hand with loose leash, is going to be recall. Recall is going to be so important because if we have a really strong recall, we have effective control over the dog, which is obviously the hot topic of the Control of Dog Acts, that we have to have dogs under effective control. And that can come on a leash, on a long line, on a short line, or with an incredibly stable, strong recall. So allowing that dog, especially those drivey dogs, especially those dogs that absolutely love to get their nose into the environment, and I'm obviously talking about my own guy here because he's a work line Springer Spaniel, literally straight into the environment, under a bush, through a tree, coming out covered in brambles. That's his idea of heaven. It is the idea of heaven. And honestly, obviously, it makes a lot of work for me because I have to come home and then pick out all of the brambles and the sticky backs from his fur, which he does not like. But that off-leash time, for me anyway, in the broad topic of loose leash walking, takes up more of his experience than loose leash walking in and of itself. The loose leash walking is we're getting to an area where I can safely let this dog off and be a dog.
Yeah.
To do that kind of dog-directed sniffari, checking in with me regularly, and I'm just walking around, keeping an eye on him, guiding him when he's maybe moving towards a little bit something that he shouldn't be moving towards, and keeping him under kind of not necessarily constant supervision, but just praising him just for being a dog. Because at the end of the day, that's what we have. We have dogs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's funny as well to kind of think a little bit about, individual dogs' needs and individual even breeds needs, because you say that Obi comes back with brambles all in his fur and everything. That would never happen with Ruby or Frenchie, like she'll walk around puddles most of the time unless she's completely saturated, in which case she decides that she's going to be a real outdoorsy dog, because it's already gone past the point of keeping herself clean.
Yeah.
But she has a great time kind of sniffing around, but she actually never really goes far from us. She likes to be typical Frenchie, wants to be involved in what the humans are at. So it kind of depends, and we all know people that have Labradors maybe that will jump straight into the river or lake or whatever it is immediately, because that's just what they love doing. So I think part of it as well is really knowing your own individual dog, right?
Absolutely, 100%. A lot of dog training, behavioral consultancy, we look at it kind of like at a broad kind of like umbrella terms of like, this is what we can hope to expect from maybe a breed type. And that is only a starting point. It's a springboard. I have had many a humbling experience where I've heard of a bloodhound that needs a little bit of training. I'm like, cool, scent trail, that's exactly what we're going to do. He's going to love that. And I've gone into that house and he's no interest in scent. Well, no more than a standard dog would.
Yes.
But I would be of the opinion that like a bloodhound should be like wanting to get into something. But it is that thing, that knowledge of like, this is what we can expect, and it's a great starting point. But then meeting the dog and understanding the dog that's in front of you and training and working with the dog in front of you is so much more vital to this component more than anything else. So we'll look at your breed of dog, kind of have a little bit of an inkling of what training might work best for maybe training loose leash walking or rewarding loose leash walking, because rewarding loose leash walking is obviously an awful lot more different than our standard basic obedience of sit down, stay, that type of a thing. But at the end of the day, we have to get on the ground, see what the dog enjoys, see what they really, really love, what enrichment really drives them and motivates them, and work that in.
Yeah, and it's the same for humans, I suppose. Like, we're all individuals, and what motivates me might be something completely different to what motivates you, and
Absolutely.
That's okay. That's what makes the world an interesting place. And I wanted to ask here as well, what might be some common mistakes that dog owners make when they're trying to teach loose leash walking? I'm presuming falling into the trap of saying all dogs love treats or all dogs love attention, or, even the motivating factors could be some of the pitfalls as well, right?
100%. Motivating factors are definitely a pitfall. Social media is another pitfall. The easy access of social media videos displaying these incredible loose leash walking capabilities of a Malinois or even a golden retriever. For example, there was a gorgeous golden retriever, the retriever display in Crufts this year, and it was absolutely fantastic to watch. It was a testament to incredible loose leash training because they weren't on leash, but they were still kind of glued to the heel and they were still working away. The pitfall is looking at that and going, that's easy, no problem, my dog can do that, and then getting frustrated when the dog doesn't.
Yeah.
Loose leash walking is probably one of the more difficult things to teach a dog because it takes up so much time. Expecting a dog to jump in and understand loose leash training straight away without any kind of history of reinforcement in the area that you want them to be in, or the schedules of reinforcement that we might look at, or how we reinforce them, is the thing that generally leads to an awful lot of frustration. It tends to lead to dogs potentially not actually getting a walk or getting their outside exercise because it's too much. They're pulling constantly, they're driving constantly, they're separating the shoulders of the owners, and that's completely understandable. And that's when someone like myself or any of the colleagues that I work with in Limerick or Cork get called in as well. So one of the big pitfalls, I believe, is expectation more than anything else. We are expecting dogs who are already embroiled in a world that is not suited for them to take their natural style of gait, of walk, of trot, of run, and completely upend that for walking next to our heel at a painfully slow pace for them.
Yeah.
Like, unless you're a runner or unless you're a power walker, getting out and walking with your dog every day, you're probably not going to be at a pace that the dog actually enjoys.
Yeah.
So taking that into consideration is probably a big pitfall. As you said, the kind of exploration of my dog is completely food focused. Now when we're outside, he's not food focused, so therefore he's unable to be trained on loose leash walking. We kind of have to come in and kind of go, well, if we're outside and he's not food focused, there might be stressors in the environment that's causing him worry. There might be something that's far more reinforcing, like access to the environment more than anything else, like in case of hunting dogs. Or, for example, I had a German Shepherd that his biggest reinforcer was tug. So we had to bring and conceal a tug toy with us to reinforce the loose leash walk capability. That if he stayed with us even for one step, he got that reward. The other thing is consistency and timing of the loose leash walking. If you have a young puppy or even a rescue dog, asking them to loose leash walk straight out the door with no extra training is going to end in disaster. It's going to end in a pulley dog, it's going to end in a frustrated dog, and it's going to end in a frustrated human as well. When we do tend to look at loose leash walking in the kind of formal sense, in like training that, the biggest advice that any dog trainer could potentially give is go out for the walk as standard. Then when all that kind of excitement of energy has been dissipated through the body, start the loose leash walking maybe about 5 minutes before the end of the walk. That is probably going to be more likely where the dog is going to succeed because they're a little bit extra tired, but also they've got all of their sniffs in, they're a little bit more mentally enriched, so they're probably going to offer a little bit more engagement. So building it into the 5 minutes, praising the absolute heck out of them as they're doing it, constantly doing it, and then maybe in a week's time of working it in at 5 minutes, You work it in at 10 minutes before the end, then 15, then 20, then 30. Obviously, to the with the time frame, we need to consider obviously the age of the dog as well, and how that affects the amount of time that we go out for a walk, that type of a thing. But building it in at the end and building it backwards in a back chain rather than a front chain is quite effective for a lot of like standard pet dogs.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a really logical way to approach it. And I want to play the blame game now a little bit as well, because, you know, we have lots of people like to blame specific tools or also glorify specific tools. For example, there's typically that conversation, a harness causes you know, causes pulling, collar versus harness, flexi leads are everybody's favorite topic. Is pulling usually caused by a specific tool?
This is an interesting question, and yes, it is a hot topic, and I think that it's a lot more complicated than just selecting one tool and going, this is your problem. All tools have their place. I don't want to obviously be putting anyone on blast or blaming anyone. We work with the knowledge that we have. We've got strong dogs. Obviously, we need that desire for control is a little bit more. But talking about tools themselves, but all tools have a pro and a con. And I'm just kind of going to umbrella term it just so that we're aware. So before we even get into the tools, generally what happens is pulling, whether it's a harness or anything that's affixed to the neck or anything like that, is generally a learned behavior. Generally. Again, these are all broad sweeping statements. We have to look at the dog in front of us, take accurate histories, that type of a thing, learning histories and stuff like that. But generally what we see is that it is a learned behavior, and all behavior is functional for dogs. So when they pull, there's a reason that they're pulling. One, there's a history of pulling. So the pulling may be uncomfortable for them, but they are essentially getting to where they want to go, sniffing what they want to sniff. So that action of pulling becomes a functional and reinforcing behavior despite the discomfort that they're in, because they're getting to where they want to go. They're engaging with what they want to engage in. And as that repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats, it deepens the action potential of the neurons from like action to consequence. So I pull because I get to where I want to go and I get to sniff, and there's a big internal reward. I do that again, the river deepens, it follows the path of released resistance, it keeps going and keeps going until it becomes, they're always pulling, they're always driving, they always want to get there. Can certain tools cause an uptake of this behavior? Potentially. Harnesses might, because they are generally more comfortable on the dog, depending on the type of harness that you are. So they generally allow for more comfortable pulling, which then obviously takes the discomfort level out of the pulling, so they're more likely to pull again. But all dogs will pull. I had a 16-year-old golden Labrador, Bosco. He was my brother. I grew up with him. He was walked on a collar all of his life, and he was a big, powerful golden Labrador. He pulled like a truck. It doesn't matter. The only thing that they don't necessarily cause pulling, but they can cause certain fallouts as well from the use of these tools. Any tool that goes around the neck, any tool, flat lead, slip, anything, they're generally located in the upper middle part of the dog's neck, which unfortunately is also the area of the dog's thyroid. And the thyroid has massive implications to what's called homeostasis in the dog. The thyroid is kind of one of the more important kind of glands. All the glands are important, but it's one of the more important glands. And any dog that pulls while on a collar or anything that goes around their neck can risk damaging the thyroid. Now, their skin is an awful lot thinner than ours as well, so the likelihood of a damaged thyroid can be quite high. And a damaged thyroid can lead to thyroid dysfunction. basically meaning it's either overactive or underactive. And in dogs, an overactive or underactive thyroid can lead to potential aggression.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about like anything that goes around the neck as well is if a dog gets startled by something or immediately pulls, jerks towards something, and it causes an unrelated jolt of pain, there could be something that's called a single trial learning event or a one trial learning, where the shock of the pain is so much that they don't necessarily realize that it's their movement that caused the pain, but the
Mm-hmm.
stimulus, and then they become reactive to the stimulus.
Yeah.
So there are potential fallouts as well. Obviously, we obviously have other collars there as well, like the like big broad collars that we have for like walking like sight hounds and stuff like that too. But they all have their fallouts as well. For example, harnesses, depending on the conformity of the harness and how it conforms to the body of the dog, certain harnesses go straight across the shoulders, which cause biomechanical and physiological restrainment in the dog's ability to move their kind of shoulders in a rotation kind of basis. So it can cause a little bit of impediment there, which can cause stress and anxiety and pain in the dog. So harnesses don't get off scot-free here either.
Yeah.
The best kind of harness that you could possibly get is a Y-shaped harness, and that's a harness that basically goes gently over the shoulders with two straps and then a single kind of strap going connecting to the middle of the belly and then on the back with a back clip as well.
Mm-hmm.
That generally allows for most free movement of the dog's front limbs, which obviously allows, and free movement is our kind of bread and butter when we take our dogs out. It can potentially stave off any, potentially, obviously dogs are predisposed to certain conditions depending on the breeding and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
it can potentially help stave off any kind of joint issues from the front at least, or
Mm-hmm.
any kind of like extra tension on the front, because a lot of dogs potentially could front load where they take an awful lot of their pressure and their weight on the front of their limbs, and obviously that can, through repeated impingement, that can cause a little bit of wear and tear prematurely. So anything that kind of allows them to move more freely is more preferable. Flexi leads. Flexi leads definitely a hot topic,
Mm-hmm.
100%. The only thing that I have found with flexi leads is that when we walk our dogs on quote unquote loose leash walking, a flexi lead is not technically loose leash walking,
Mm-hmm.
because there's always an element of tension on that loose leash. The dog can move freely forward, but there's a connecting point to the front or the back of the collar or the harness that has always got a little bit of tension. So there's always that feedback of potentially being pulled back,
Mm-hmm.
which could also, as we discussed already, increase the likelihood of pulling behavior because it's being rehearsed continuously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my preference for tools is a Y harness with a back clip on a long line. I've had many experiences using a long line. It looks ridiculous, to be fair. You're walking with a 15-meter line coiled in one hand and leaving it safely out for your other dog. Walking that in the city can be a little bit strange looking. But hey, look, what people think of me and my dog is none of my business. My dog's
Yeah.
happy because he's got that little bit of extra freedom going. So, the politician's answer about tools and whether or not they cause pulling, it depends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in a sense I asked the question because it's a bad question. We as humans like to oversimplify and look for one simple answer. You see it across the board. We see it in nutrition as well. You know that there's a lot of companies out there saying, you know, this one pill is going to solve all your dog's problem and it's all natural, and it's like, yeah, well, yes, maybe is the answer, but it depends is also the real answer, because
Yeah.
you know, not every single dog has the same problem, and it's going to be exactly the same for training and everything. And while I'm on maybe bad questions and talking about tools as well, do we want to talk briefly on corrective tools? Because some people will also have heard of, maybe good, bad, or misinformed advice
Mhm.
online, particularly about prong collars and no pull harnesses and things like that. I'm guessing there's more of a multifaceted answer, regardless. But would these maybe be places that people should look at as a first option, or maybe avoid entirely as a first or second option? Or how do we feel about corrective tools in general?
Yeah. So corrective tools, I'm of the opinion that they should not be your first port of call,
Yeah,
100%. As a purely positive reinforcement trainer, I wouldn't be advising them anyway, to be honest. However, they absolutely should not be your first point of call. Imagine, if you will, you're learning a new skill, like a language, and you get it wrong because it's your first session learning a new language, and your teacher comes over and slaps you in the back of the head, or takes a ruler and slaps your wrist. That's not necessarily going to give you the impetus to want to loosely to loosely walks
yeah,
to want to learn the new language, or at least even engage in it.
yeah,
So I always hesitate to anthropomorphize the experiences, but for the sake of kind of metaphor analogy and allowing people to understand where the dog's coming from, it is a useful tool.
yeah.
Um, so if we look at it like that, and we kind of put a puppy that's pulling, or even their first experience is they're walking outside for the very first time, they forge ahead, and a correction is used without any other history of reinforcement or other kind of teaching. You might get a dog that's, yes, 100% going to walk next to you, but that could be from fear of the pain that could be caused if they forge forward, not necessarily a desire to engage with you and kind of go, look, dad, look, mum, look what I found. Isn't it great? You're still here?
Mhm.
This is fantastic. So it corrective means can take away an awful lot of the pleasure of the walk from a dog, in my opinion. This is a strict opinion more than anything else. Um, it is kind of an icky topic that we kind of dance around an awful lot. Um, do they have a place? I'm unsure of it in myself. In my professional opinion, in my professional work, they don't have a place in my work, 100%.
Mhm.
But for others, maybe. Again, going back to that uh, old answer, it does depend.
Yeah,
But
of
if you're
course.
coming for a session with me, they're they're not going to have that place,
And that's
because
okay. I think
yeah,
I
and
think
that's
it's
okay as
important.
well.
I think it's important that we speak to the person that many of you listening in are going to be trainers and are going to have wild experience
Hmm.
to build up a case for any of these things. But lots of people listening in are also going to be sitting here listening in, potentially, that are struggling with loose leash walking and want to
Absolutely.
find, it would be very easy to put up a billboard here for anything and say this is going to be your solution and buy it for 9.99. And they would very likely, or you would very likely, go ahead and do that. So I think it's
Yeah,
important to, and I really appreciate that you've kind of made that differentiation between what would be worthwhile looking at as a first port of call, and what could be used then by a professional that has had lots of training and might have a very specific niche use case for something. It's, and that's,
absolutely.
there's a big difference between
And
those
from my
things.
perspective, more than anything else, relationship and engagement is going to be one of the most important things when we're out loose leash walking. If your dog is offering
Mhm.
engagement, if the relationship is strong in between you and that bond is there, they're going to want to check in. They're going
Yeah.
to forge on ahead, maybe at a little bit of tension on that leash, and then immediately stop and kind of look back as if to say, "Oh, you're still here. This is great." For me, more than anything else, that is more important than the skill of loose leash walking. Like the skill is obviously there for safety mechanisms and stuff like that, and obviously to safeguard the dog's body as well as the human's body.
Hmm.
But that kind of offered engagement is going to be an awful lot more. And I find that when corrective tools are used, it can damage that bond because
Yeah.
it's installing a level of fear, pain, and discomfort into that bond.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, when a dog for me is unconditional love.
Yeah.
I don't want to sully that with pain, with an association of pain, discomfort, or displeasure when they look at me when we're outside.
Yeah,
So that
absolutely.
would
And
be my
good.
hot take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I so appreciate that. And like we started off this conversation strongly agreeing that, this should all be fun for us. We should be enjoying our walks with our dogs and
100%.
seeing them having the time of their life for that hour a day or whatever it is that you're getting out for.
Mm.
And I suppose going back to something I brought up there a minute ago as well, some people might be listening in and struggling. When does it make sense to get a trainer involved?
I hesitate to say as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But training does, I mean, like I've had calls from clients going, "Oh, my puppy, I literally only just got my puppy, he's 8 weeks old. I don't know if I should get you in just yet." And I was like, if you want to get me in at 8 weeks, that's absolutely fine. The sooner we
Hmm.
start the process of
Yeah.
not necessarily training when the puppy is 8 weeks old, but
Hmm.
like guiding and letting them know what to expect, the better, in my opinion. There's this kind of old school view that you can't train a dog um, until they're like 4, 5, 6 months old. And that is true in certain respects, but it's
Hmm.
also not true at all. You can guide a dog towards, or guide a puppy towards the lovely adult dog that you want from day dot, from the day that they come in. You can guide them to where they want. So there's a lot of basic loose leash training available out there, and they kind of, especially online and stuff like that, and they kind of follow a very similar pattern. If your dog is really successful at that, and you're a fairly competent or experienced dog owner and you know how to do it, absolutely fantastic. Only call a dog trainer or a professional if you've got maybe a hunting dog that is not responding to your traditional loose leash walking, because there are different ways of teaching it. For example, my guy, Springer Spaniel, know I've mentioned him before, and he's probably going to be mentioned an awful lot more through many conversations that I have with clients and yourselves. But he's from a work line background. We rescued him from Dogs Trust. His mother was a work line Springer. His father was a work line Springer. So he's got that drive to work. He's also got a bit of a prey drive as well. So when we're outside, dangling a tasty treat or a sausage in front of his nose is he's just like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Don't care about it. I want to go and engage and search for something. So that prey drive is going to be really, really important. So I actually use Simone Muller's techniques for
Hmm.
predation substitution training. And if you do have a hunting dog out there and you're struggling with some loose leash walking skills or engagement skills, I highly recommend her book for Walking Together, which is the fourth volume in her predation substitution. It is incredible. It refocuses what a loose leash should look like, especially when we're working with hunting dogs, um, and also really kind of puts the fun into, you have an amazingly high drive dog that's going to get up to mischief and cause issues. Just have a little bit of fun and enjoy it, and maybe work on these techniques over the course of 4 or 5 weeks, and you should start to see a reduction in that pulley behavior. So long answer to your question that was, but a short answer to your question, either as soon as possible, or if you start to struggle, if you start to really kind of have a sense that this is now becoming a behavior that is learned and internally rewarded from the dog that they're pulling, then we need to kind of strip back, either go back to basics, build up that positive kind of reinforcement schedule in and of that area, potentially refocus what it means to actually have a loose leash, or even refocus what it means to quote unquote go out for a walk.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely. It's
you
it,
know,
it's amazing, and even from personal experience with Ruby, like I grew up with dogs. We had show dogs. We used to go to the Irish Kennel Club shows throughout my childhood with St. Bernards. So I getting Ruby, I thought that I knew that quite a bit about training dogs, and from a layperson perspective. But we were training her in a city, whereas I grew up in the countryside with dogs. It was a very, very different kind of way of living. And honestly, calling in a trainer even for a 1 hour session just changed everything for us. It made our experience so much nicer.
mhm.
And it just having an external professional's eye that sees this every single day just really is a game changer, and it's worth its weight in gold. And especially, like you say, from a puppy perspective as well, you've got a whole life together to build up. You've got hopefully years and years and years, potentially decades worth of daily walks, hopefully. So, like, getting in a trainer for an hour or two is already going to make such an impact on your lives together. It's so
Mm.
good. You mentioned Simona Muller's books, which we have available on our website at the moment. We'll put a link in. We also did a podcast episode with Simona, which we'll link
Yes,
in
I
the
saw
the
that.
notes. And you mentioned a book earlier on in the episode as well, which we don't have, but we'll find the name of it and note that into the notes as well later. You mentioned going out and about and talking about distractions, and I wanted to get into that as well a little bit, just to talk about people's different challenges.
Mhm.
Because I think sometimes it's, like I mentioned, we had a countryside garden growing up. It was, relatively low distraction environment, whereas trying to train things in a city then with Ruby, I found that a lot more challenging. Um, do people need to take that into consideration as well, the level of challenge they're taking on, especially if there's other dogs, squirrels, other people training at the same time? Do we need to give ourselves a little bit of credit for that as well?
110%. Absolutely. There is a distinct difference to walking your dog and training your dog on a loose leash out in your back garden where they're very familiar with, or even in your housing estate where they're very familiar with, they know all the scents, and then going into a high distraction environment like a
Yeah.
city. The worst thing that you could potentially do is to try and train your loose leash walking straight away or even a couple of weeks into your loose leash training by going to like a market where there's all the people and all the distractions and all of the sense of food. So it's about effectively scaffolding the skill. I mentioned earlier about kind of like back chaining the behavior from the start, from the end of the walk to the start of the walk. Once we kind of gotten to that perspective, we start to walk in slightly more distracting environments. And I mean slightly, because dogs are very keen on changes in their environment and they want to kind of either figure out if it's something that they should be worried about or and then move away, or is it something that I can engage with and or eat, let's be honest.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
so including when we do this training, increasing a level or a criterion in the training is potential for almost going back a couple of steps in the training more so than anything else. If you've got a perfectly loose leash walking either forwards or the dog is in front of you or the dog is behind you or even the dog is right next to you and the leash is loose and you're absolutely fantastic, he does it every single time. Going into a new environment, that is a new antecedent arrangement for that dog. And we may not have worked in that environment, whether it's new scents or new sights or new sensory experiences, like there's a lake next to them or there's more people around. So the likelihood that our dog has generalized the training to apply to this situation straight off, quite low. So behooves us then to kind of go back a couple of steps and engage the dog in training around that situation as well. So maybe walking halfway into town or halfway into the city where the energy starts to pick up a little bit and there's a little bit more movement and there's a little bit more cars, and doing your loose leash training by popping the treat onto the dog's nose, praising them for engaging with you, walking lovely next to you and engaging and actively engaging in that situation is worth more to the dog than like, okay, he's a perfect loose leash walker, let's go into the city, and then your brain is fried because all of a sudden the dog is starting to pull. And then the dog's brain is fried because all of a sudden dad is starting to pull me back again. What's going on? So I liken it to almost trying to climb up a ladder with no rungs. You know, we're
Yeah.
going to fail. If there's a ladder with no rungs, we're going to fall down. But if we take the time to build in those rungs at really regular intervals by just increasing the criteria or the distraction or the smells or the duration or something like that, just ever so slightly, and listening to the dog's ability to do that as well, then we're going to have a far more stable foundation to have that effective behavior in generalized situations. So in town or in a market or next to the beach or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant, and I think I hope it gives people a lot more confidence now in what they're doing, and I think we've summarized quite well already. Get help where you need it. Have a little bit of fun with it. Build it
Absolutely.
up step by step. Get those rungs on the ladder. You have to build it together. Find the motivation of the dog that's in front of you, and try to work with it bit by bit. Was there any other kind of challenges or tips or anything that you wanted to cover, or do you think we've already summarized it quite well for a very short episode, obviously?
Yeah, I think we've covered an awful lot, and your kind of your summary just there was like, wow, you should be a podcast host. No, I think so. Yeah, the main thing more than anything else, fun and engagement.
Yeah.
More so than anything else, traditional loose leash walking, it looks like we're training the dog to um, walk next to us
Hmm.
on a loose leash. It does. It's in the title of the
Yeah.
training.
Yeah.
But if we zoom out a little bit and take it from a top-down perspective, what we actually are training is a history of engagement around an area and reinforcing that engagement. The dog then will tend to want to offer that engagement in that area because there's a history of reward. And that is essentially what loose leash training is. The definition at the start of the episode and then the definition at the end of the episode, slightly different, but in the same kind of wheelhouse.
Oh,
So,
totally.
yes, 100% have fun. Literally, have as much fun out there. Learn about the dog that's in front of you. Laugh that they're going to potentially upend the most wonderful plans available.
Yeah.
100%. And reward and engage. And yeah, that's all I.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant, and like you say, it's more than just walking on the leash. It's about building a relationship. It's about building a life together. It's about understanding each other. So yeah, there's more to it, and I appreciate so many insights, and I also am delighted that I've been able to summarize what you've been getting across all through the episode, so that I've actually understood what I need to do with Ruby to increase all the little bits and pieces that we want to kind of get a little bit better at, even though she's quite good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, Emmet. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and
Thank
I
you
hope.
very, very much for having me on. I've been following this for quite some time, and then when you reached out, I was like, oh no, I'm so nervous. But no, seriously, thank you so much for having me on. It was a great pleasure, and it was a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I keep saying as well, and I said it to you before. I learn so much every single week, just chatting about dogs, and it's so nice to be able to have guests come on and chat with me and share their experience. So it's so appreciated. Thank you so much, and hope to speak with you again soon.
Very much so.
Thank you. And once again, a huge thank you to Emmet for coming on and sharing such wonderful information with us about loose leash walking and about the broader relationship building with our dogs. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you'd like to find out more about what we get up to at Ruby Reese or at dognutrition.ie, or what Emmet gets up to at Sound as a Hound, you can check out all of our links in the show notes. We also mentioned a couple of resources during the podcast episode, so we've also added those into the notes as well. We thank you for listening in, and we'll be back to you with another episode next Tuesday. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast, please follow or subscribe or like or whatever the magic button says. Please click on that. It would be so appreciated, because it does help this podcast get in front of more listeners that will appreciate the content. Also on that note, if you have friends that you're talking to about all sorts of different dog topics, and you know that we've got a podcast episode about that, do give us a little bit of a recommendation. We appreciate it so much, because our guests that come on take time out of their busy weeks and away from their clients to share information with us for free. So it is so appreciated, and let's get the word out there a little bit further and get a broader reach so that the good information can get to more ears. Thank you very much for listening in, and we'll see you again next week for another podcast episode.